In a world where the hum of refrigerators fills every corner, the Amish have carved out a quiet rebellion. They thrive without the need for buzzing appliances, preserving food in ways that feel almost like an ancient spell, rituals handed down through generations. Picture bustling kitchens filled with laughter and meticulous care, leading to pantries stocked with glass jar treasures. For the Amish, this isn't about survivalist theatrics or trendy challenges. It's simply life. And their secret weapon? Water bath canning. If you've ever admired rows of pickles, peaches, or tomatoes tucked neatly into jars, you've glimpsed the magic. But don't let the simplicity fool you. It's not just food in a jar, boil it, done. Oh no, this is precision work. Trust me, when I tried it, my kitchen turned into a sticky, chaotic mess. Seals refused to seal, and I had a terrifying epiphany. I would never survive the apocalypse. For the Amish, though, it's second nature. Each jar is washed and prepped like a delicate artifact. Fruits, veggies, or sauces are packed with care, then sent into roiling cauldrons of boiling water, like little submarines embarking on a vital mission. The heat kills off potential invaders, bacteria, mold, anything that might spoil the goods. And once sealed, those jars are time capsules. The tomatoes you picked this summer could very well star in your 2034 spaghetti night. Some canned goods even stay fresh for over 5 years. But the hardest part? It's not the boiling or the timing. It's resisting the temptation to crack open a jar early. My grandma once laughed at me for not knowing the difference between a hot pack and a raw pack. Apparently, that's amateur hour in her world. For the Amish, though, this is art. Their jars are lifelines, ready for harsh winters or poor harvests. While the rest of us panic shop for bread and milk, they calmly reach for a jar of home-canned potatoes. And the taste? Oh, it's something else entirely. Forget frozen veggies that lose their spirit in a few months. Amish pickles have a snap that's pure joy. A canned peach can brighten the gloomiest winter day with a burst of summer sweetness. All of this, mind you, without a single refrigerator in sight. There's a beauty in this simplicity. No electricity bills, no fear of power outages ruining the stash, and no fiddling with temperamental dials. It's just jars, boiling water, and a know-how passed down like a family heirloom. But let's be real, nothing is perfect. Ever tried prying open a jar lid sealed like Fort Knox? Last year, I canned some salsa so tightly my neighbor joked I should sell it as tamper-proof. Water bath canning isn't just a preservation method, it's a lesson in patience and precision. The Amish may have mastered the art, but for the rest of us, it's a humbling reminder that good things, truly good things, take time. When the fire dies down and all that's left is a pile of wood ash, most of us just see a mess to sweep up. But for the Amish, it's a resource, pure, practical gold. They've turned ash into a secret weapon for food preservation, one that feels more like alchemy than practicality. Take eggs, for example. Imagine packing them in a container full of fine, dry ash. Sounds odd, right? But this isn't some happy accident. It's intentional, clever, and downright scientific. Ash is alkaline, creating an environment where bacteria simply can't thrive. No bacteria means no rot. It's that simple. While we might see ash as a dirty nuisance, the Amish see it as the perfect protective blanket for their fresh eggs. They don't stop there. Root vegetables like carrots and beets get the same VIP treatment, buried snugly in ash to keep them firm and sprout-free through the long winter months. It's like wrapping your produce in a cozy winter coat, one that doesn't cost a dime. The trick, though, is precision. Too damp? Disaster. Too much ash? Good luck finding those eggs again without turning your kitchen into a dusty crime scene. Trust me, I've learned that one the hard way. Moderation, it turns out, is key. Not just any ash will do, though. It has to come from clean, untreated wood. No fancy scented logs or chemical-laden remnants. The Amish have mastered this balance, approaching every step with the kind of intuitive precision that can only come from generations of practice. It's like watching someone whip up a perfect pie crust without ever measuring the ingredients. The history of ash preservation runs deep, too. Even the ancient Romans used it to keep food fresh and the method endures today in the hands of those who value simplicity and patience. It's an almost poetic nod to the past, making you wonder why more of us haven't embraced these techniques. After all, we got fire pits in our backyards, but instead of storing eggs, we're roasting marshmallows and burning old receipts. Not that there's anything wrong with mores, but the Amish remind us there's more to ashes than meets the eye. Speaking of nostalgia, wouldn't it be great if we could stash other things in ash, like our creaky knees or stiff joints? Sadly, nature's preservation trick only works for food, not our aging bodies. But there's a certain beauty in that, isn't there? While we can save our veggies and eggs, we're reminded that some things, like time itself, are meant to move forward. Once you get the hang of the Amish ash trick, you start to realize why it's lasted through the ages. It's low cost, reliable, and guaranteed to confuse anyone who spots a bin of eggs buried in ashes in your pantry. Sure, they might look at you like you've gone full end-of-the-world prepper, but you know what? They'll be knocking on your door when their store-bought eggs spoil, begging for a taste of your ash-preserved treasures. Funny how that works, right? But let's take it up a notch. Butter as a food-saving superhero. While we're all fumbling with flimsy plastic containers and mismatched lids, the Amish have been using nature's original Tupperware, fat. Melted lard or tallow poured over cooked meat creates an airtight seal that keeps oxygen out, which means bacteria can't crash the party. Bacon, sausage, duck, you name it, can sit happily in their fat baths for months, perfectly preserved and practically spot-treated. I'll admit, my first attempt at fat sealing a roast felt like something out of a survival reality show. But when I cracked open that jar 2 months later, the meat was so tender it could have starred in a gourmet cooking show. My family? Not so sure. Are we really eating this? They asked, staring at their plates like I'd just served them alien cuisine. Spoiler alert, they loved it. Turns out, fat doesn't just preserve, it deepens flavor, locks in moisture, and keeps everything tasting as fresh as the day it was cooked. Fun fact, the French have been doing this for centuries and call it confit. If it's good enough for fancy Parisian chefs, it's good enough for anyone. Just make sure your fat is filtered, or you'll be biting into what you thought was roast beef and discovering an unexpected crunchy bacon surprise. Unless you're into that sort of thing. But the preservation magic doesn't stop there. Let's talk fermentation. Long before kombucha took over farmers' markets, the Amish were transforming simple veggies into tangy, long-lasting staples like sauerkraut and pickles. The process is beautifully simple. Let good bacteria feast on sugars, turning fresh produce into flavorful, apocalypse-ready foods. Of course, simplicity doesn't mean easy. When I tried making sauerkraut, I thought, how hard could it be? Cabbage, salt, jar, done. But then my kitchen started smelling like a gym locker from the 1980s. My cat refused to enter the room for days. Still, I stuck with it, and a few weeks later, beneath the funk was some of the crunchiest, most flavorful kraut I'd ever tasted. Science meets patience, and the result is culinary gold. Fermentation isn't just preservation, it's history in a jar. No electricity, no gadgets, just nature doing its thing, as it has for millennia. So, whether you're sealing meat in fat or fermenting veggies into tangy perfection, the Amish remind us of one timeless truth. Sometimes, the simplest methods are the most ingenious. It's because they've got root cellars, nature's VIP lounge for produce. These underground hideaways are the ultimate food storage hack, keeping things cool and cozy without a single watt of electricity. The Amish rely on root cellars to stockpile potatoes, apples, carrots, and other hardy staples, ensuring they've got fresh food even when the ground outside is frozen solid. Talk about forward thinking. Root cellars work because they naturally regulate temperature and humidity, creating an environment that's practically tailored to preserving produce. It's like a built-in climate control system, but without the fancy gadgets. And the best part? They don't just keep food from going bad, they actually improve it. Potatoes get sweeter, apples stay crisp, and carrots taste like they've been plucked fresh from the garden. Of course, not all root cellars are created equal. Building one takes a bit of know-how. The Amish have it down to a science, placing their cellars where the ground stays cool but doesn't flood, and using natural insulation to keep things steady. They even have tricks for dealing with pests because nothing says buzzkill like finding your stash has become a buffet for mice. When I first heard about root cellars, I thought, great, I'll just dig a hole in my backyard. Turns out it's not that simple. My root cellar quickly became a soggy pit that smelled like wet socks. Lesson learned. Leave it to the experts. But root cellars are more than just food storage. They're a philosophy. They represent a way of living that values preparation, patience, and respect for nature's rhythms. For the Amish, it's about working with what they have and making it last. And when you think about it, isn't that a lesson we could all use? Imagine stumbling across a perfectly preserved root cellar a century from now. You'd find jars of pickled beets, bags of dried apples, and crates of carrots, all still ready to eat. It's a testament to how timeless these methods are: simple, sustainable, and effective. So while most of us are busy figuring out how to Marie Kondo our refrigerators, the Amish are sitting back, enjoying a perfectly stored apple from last fall, and wondering why we ever stopped doing it their way. Pickling is proof that sometimes the simplest ideas are the most brilliant. The Amish didn't invent it, but they've certainly perfected it. Cucumbers, eggs, beets, onions, if it fits in a jar, they'll pickle it. And the secret? Vinegar. It's not just a tangy sidekick to your salad. It's a bacterial bouncer, kicking out anything that might try to spoil the party. The beauty of pickling lies in its alchemy. What starts as a humble vegetable transforms into something that can survive months, or even years, without breaking a sweat. It's like turning your pantry into a time capsule. And let's be real, who doesn't love opening a jar of pickles that have been aging gracefully, only to discover they taste even better than when you first made them? The Amish know that pickling isn't just about food preservation. It's about creating layers of flavor. Vinegar doesn't just keep bacteria out. It invites tanginess and depth in. Pickled beets become a sweet and sour snack. Pickled onions add a zing to sandwiches. And pickled eggs? They're like little tangy protein bombs. Sure, they might make your kitchen smell like a science experiment, but that's just part of the charm. When I tried pickling for the first time, I started with cucumbers, figuring they were the least intimidating. I didn't account for how strong the vinegar smell would be, though. My whole house smelled like a salad bar for days. But once I opened that jar a few weeks later and took my first bite, it was all worth it. Crisp, tangy, and delicious. Even my cat, who usually turns her nose up at anything green, seemed intrigued, though that could have just been the vinegar fumes getting to her. The history of pickling is just as fascinating as the process itself. Ancient Mesopotamians were preserving their harvests in vinegar long before refrigerators, or even written language, existed. In a way, every jar of pickles is like a little piece of culinary history. The Amish understand this. Their jars aren't just food storage. They're tradition, culture, and practicality rolled into one. And here's the real kicker. Pickling doesn't just preserve food. It enhances it. It's preservation with a side of pizzazz. So, the next time you bite into a crunchy dill pickle or top your burger with pickled onions, take a moment to appreciate the magic of vinegar. It's been working behind the scenes for centuries, quietly making our food better and our pantries brighter. The Amish way of preserving food is more than a survival skill. It's a testament to tradition, patience, and ingenuity. Take pickling, for instance. Did you know an unopened vinegar pickle jar can stay good for over 5 years? That's the kind of shelf life modern expiration dates can only dream of. Of course, getting the salt to vinegar ratio just right is an art. My first attempt was, let's just say, memorable for all the wrong reasons. My family gamely tried my experiment, but their smiles were about as convincing as my pickles were edible. Lesson learned. Balance is key. Pickled eggs are a personal favorite, a little jar of culinary poetry. Those creamy whites, floating like pearls, are both comforting and practical. If I were a cucumber, I'd want to be pickled too. Immortality in a jar? Sign me up. It's funny how such simple solutions can make high-tech gadgets seem overcomplicated. And then there's smoking. For the Amish, it's not just about flavor, it's a preservation technique that keeps food fresh for years. Imagine a pantry stocked with smoked ham, fish, and even cheeses. It's like having a gourmet backup plan for any occasion. My first foray into smoking chicken wings didn't go as planned. I overdid the spices, and every bite felt like a fiery dare. But that's the beauty of these time-honored methods. They're worth perfecting. Even dried herbs carry a bit of magic. Hanging bundles of rosemary and thyme aren't just decorative. They're natural preservatives, packing antimicrobial properties that have been trusted since ancient Egypt. My attempt to dry oregano turned into a comedy of errors when my cat decided it was his new toy. The Amish, however, have perfected this process, ensuring that even the smallest garden harvest goes a long way. What's remarkable is how these practices don't just preserve food, they preserve a way of life. Root cellars, salt curing, pickling, and smoking. All these methods carry the wisdom of generations. They remind us that innovation isn't always about invention. Sometimes, it's about rediscovering what's already there. So, the next time you bite into a pickle or savor smoked cheddar, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of these age-old techniques, and maybe even give one a try yourself. Who knows? You might just stumble upon your own delicious tradition.